I don't follow all the philosophical allusions.
I would be happy to try to explicate if
no,
it's
it's okay. Perhaps this is not the time for me to catch up on my lack of education in philosophy. But yeah, I mean, I think I do get the gist of what you're advocating. Forms of research which are not subject to the market, to the drive to, quantify graduate throughput and
right.
meet the needs of funders, right. and what you call, various forms of control that we have today. And I like what you say, but right at the beginning, you began with Marx's example of the schoolmaster who is sort of not subsumed
yes.
under capital. Now that I take to be the schoolmaster who doesn't work for, you said, an education-mongering institution.
Correct.
Which is, of course, what happened over time and what we all do today, and that's the, yeah.
Right.
But my little understanding of schoolmasters, of, pre-modern schoolmasters and also pre-modern universities, say medieval universities, where scholars actually were paid by the students, if I understand it correctly.
Correct.
So those schoolmasters were really dependent upon whichever pupils they could muster and their parents. Now that was a very insecure, I guess I'm being awfully kind of practical and simplistic here, but that was a very insecure mode of life. So we've traded that in for a more secure mode of life, but with a loss of control.
I agree. I mean, I think
you are advocating remaining, I mean, not going back to a situation where we paid by our own students, but you would like us to recover some of the freedom.
Although in effect we are paid by our students. I mean, that's what tuition is.
Yes, but we're no longer autonomous because it's all, in great big centralized institutions. So I suppose I'm wondering, is there not a practical impediment to what you're proposing?
Well, I mean, one of the things that I am doing toward the end, not so much toward the beginning, but toward the end, is that I'm trying to turn something upside down. In other words, I think we worry often about how do we understand, teach, whatever, the humanities within the university, a knowledge-mongering institution. And the inversion I'm sort of playing with there is the idea of, well, let's try to figure out what kind of activity we want to affirm, and then worry about where, how to think about what kind of structure it ought to fit into. And in fact, let the structure, in a sense, be led by some kind of struggle to make clear what we're trying to affirm about the work of study. So the schoolmaster, I mean, what you're doing there is you're catching the sort of history of a particular, like the schoolhouse, or even the tutor who would come from home to home, and this sort of thing. And, those are different ways of thinking about the location in which certain economic relationships are possible, and educational ones as well. And I think we want to be careful about constantly starting with a set of assumptions about, well, in what place will we do something that we figure out how to fit there somehow, and try to find a way to push ahead on this idea of, well, what is this activity that we think ought to find a house somewhere, and then go from there. It seems to me we don't spend enough time trying to sort that out.
I'm only working to move this around, sir.
I'm interested in trying to think about this modeling of work and play in relation to something that's been quite shockingly successful in this arena, and that's the Apple empire. Mm-hmm. If you go into an Apple store, everybody is wearing a T-shirt that says work is play. Mm-hmm. What does one do in trying to apprehend or even philosophically grasp how capital has produced a modeling of production that now has everyone gulled into thinking that they're in a condition of bliss when they are working 28 hours a day for Mr. Jobs. How does one get outside of that kind of inversion of this paradigm and retain something like the uselessness of play rather than the application of play to someone else's capital extraction?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that's essential is trying to, first of all, be clear about how work and play have been brought into interaction with one another. And I mean, the example that you give is excellent. I mean, it's very clear that in a certain way, what informatics and sort of computer technology and you know, the entire sort of virtualization of knowledge has facilitated is a bringing together of, you know, the activities we might at one point have associated with working and those which perhaps not playing but gaming, you know, so that we now see many things that had sort of separate spheres in which they flourished as converging in ways. And I think that's part of what Marx is trying to describe when he talks about the real subsumption of labor. All these sort of incommensurable differences among things start actually to acquire a kind of an uncanny and frightening homogeneity. So the first step is trying to be clear about, well, what does it mean to do that play and work maneuver? But what I'm proposing here is that one of the things that is needed is trying to be a little more astute about how we understand work, especially as it's being treated in such a way that it can now be fused with playing. And I use the Donzelot example because one of the things that he's trying to draw out is that was very conspicuously being used as the way to advertise, you know, how it is that you would want to stay in your position because you enjoyed it. It made you happy, and they gave you benefits, and they took care of your health, and they made sure that, you know, you had some paltry pharmacological treatment for your depression, but that they were caring about your enjoyment of your work. And that seems to me to be